Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, who last week announced that he has a new role with The Athletic. He, of course, covers college football, does a great job with that, writes columns and more. And he joins us on 365 Sports. And, Sam, thank you very much. Congratulations on your new role. How much of it changes now with what you were doing in the first place?
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It'll change a decent bit because for the last 13, 14 years that I've covered college sports, it's been very similar in that you go through spring football, you go through your recruiting, you go through the preseason, the media days, and then into the season, and you do that whole routine every year. I think that'll change for me now in that I haven't traveled as much during the spring, and we're going to be spending the next week and a half preparing for the opening of the spring portal window here on April 16th. And then, that'll make late April, early May, which is usually a quiet time. That's going to make it a very busy time for me as we track where guys are going, who's getting in the portal, and then where they end up committing to. And then now this off season, instead of necessarily being involved in realignment, which, knock on wood, hopefully we're not having major issues there, we're going to be tracking the fallout of what happens on Monday with the House settlement and how our programs instituting revenue sharing, how do NIL collectives, what's their role in this moving forward, things like that. And then when we get closer to the season, we'll have to talk. I don't know. Am I going to media days? I don't know. Does that still make sense in this day and age? I'll probably still go to coaching school in San Antonio. I try to never miss that. And then there's a personnel and recruiting symposium in Nashville in August every year, so I will go to that in August, which is usually would be a time I would be going to somebody's training camp practice. So instead of going to that, I'll be going to the symposium and then preparing. And then we'll do a preseason portal top 100 for the season to look at who are the top transfers and who we think they're going to have the biggest impact. And then when we get to the season, I think I'll probably do some traditional game coverage, but then when we get toward the end, when we get to November, probably going to back off of game coverage a little bit because we got to prepare for the opening of the winter window, which of course is in early December, and that's the busiest time of the year. So I'll probably spend a few weeks off the road making phone calls and tracking and trying to be ahead of what all the player movement's going to look like at that time.
Sam, we just played the Chris Kleiman clip from yesterday about how none of the coaches are in the room when they make kind of the arbitrary decisions about scholarship numbers and roster limits and all that. They should put coaches and guys like you whose whole schedule revolves around these things in the room because, the talk of college football right now is how difficult the schedule is to navigate.
Yeah, no doubt. It is very challenging. And again, I think as long as this is still college football and there's still players going to class and there's an academic component involved and thus an academic calendar to operate around, there's never going to be a perfect schedule. It would be very easy for us to say, hey, let's go to the NFL schedule. Well, the NFL schedule doesn't have to worry about the semester ending in December and the natural break there. So that's why I think Kleiman's right. You do need some more people involved, but you do run the risk of what happens at every level when it comes to the NCAA, when any kind of rule change is made or any kind of administrative changes, that what applies well for one set of schools may not necessarily apply well for the other. So what makes sense for the Power 4 schools or the Big Ten schools, SEC schools, may not make sense for Conference USA schools. It may not make sense for the MAC schools. It may not make sense for FCS schools or Division II. And that's where the challenge comes for the NCAA when they're setting up these types of situations, these types of rules and guidelines and calendars and schedules, is trying to apply it across the board to an entire sport. And I think that's where, as we get further and further along over the years, the power conference schools, the ones that are playing this game, where we're compensating players in a real way and we're having full revenue sharing maxed out, they're going to be playing a different game than the others. And that's why I do wonder at some point, not necessarily because the schools want to break away, but I wonder if it's just going to be practical at some point because the problems that are the issues that they deal with are going to be very different than what the other schools do.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Sam. And yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about what we were talking about a few minutes ago, just kind of ranting about it. And I'm sitting here, admittedly, looking at it from the position of a school in the Big Ten or the Big 12 or the ACC. And yeah, employee status sounds great, and they could probably swing it, but can Charlotte or can Texas State or whatever? And that does make it just a complex conversation that is not just, hey, you can wave the magic wand. So it does feel like a split of some sort just has to happen for everybody's sake, to just have the conversations progress, because if you try to please everybody, like you said, then it's just impossible to do, basically.
Right, because let's take revenue sharing for an example. If the settlement gets passed on Monday and we move into the summer and everybody's revenue sharing, most of the power conference schools are probably going to max out, if not all of them. They're going to max out at that 20.5, and then you're going to even have some power schools that are probably go over that using NIL to go over that for their football and men's basketball. When you get to the group of five, for instance, the American, I was talking to some coaches in the American a few weeks back. They're probably going to be a lot less in terms of how much they're spending. They're not going to be meeting that because that's just not financially feasible for them. So you're going to have a power conference football roster. Let's say an SEC school or a Big Ten school is going to use, of that 20.5 million, they're going to probably spend somewhere between 13 and 17 million, depending on how much they divvy up to their other sports, is going to be spent just on the football roster. In the American, you're looking at 3 to 5. So that is a massive difference. You're talking about a $10 million roster difference. So at that, when you take that, just that single number into consideration, those they're playing different sports. So, and not to say that we don't do that now, but at least there are scholarship limits and there are practice time rules and all that stuff is consistent. The 20.5 cap's going to be consistent, but not everybody's going to be able to reach that. And that's where, and then when you get down further, obviously further down the food chain, it's going to be less and less. So that's what makes it so challenging. And it's just where we are in the landscape. I don't think there's a silver bullet or a magic answer to it.
Sam, we had, and I don't remember exactly, Mike Buddy from TCU on the show a couple of weeks ago. He brought this up. What if nothing happens on Monday? What if that doesn't pass? What in the world? One, I think we'll boycott for a little bit because we're tired of talking about it. So at least if something is ruled, then perhaps we can now move forward. But what if it doesn't pass?
Yeah, it's going to be chaotic because essentially we're going to be in the status quo right now.
Yeah.
We'll continue with where we are now, which is not ideal, but at least we have, I don't think that's ideal. I don't think that's a healthy way to move forward. I think it's beneficial for everyone if it gets passed and if we have some sensibility. Now, here's what I will say. If it gets passed, that still doesn't preclude any other lawsuits from coming. Now, it's going to preclude some of the lawsuits because the part of the settlement is going to be closing up some of the litigation that's involved in that, but that's not going to preclude news lawsuits from coming because there's going to be different ways to attack this. For instance, I was talking with somebody at an NIL collective yesterday who's in a Power 4 NIL collective. So if we go to this in revenue sharing and we're sharing 20.5 million, that's the cap. And then NIL is going to have this quote unquote clearinghouse that is going to be, whether it's NCAA or whether it's overseen by the conferences, what have you. And the clearinghouse is supposed to determine fair market value. The first time they turn down a contract for fair market value, they're going to get sued because who's to say fair market value? What fair market value to an NIL collective is going to be what we are willing to pay. So how do you establish those guidelines? There's also going to be, I think, some bucking back at the confidentiality. It's like, hey, why do we have to disclose this contract between this private NIL collective and this private individual? Why do we have to disclose that to a clearinghouse? Like, why is that not private? I think you're going to, so I wouldn't be surprised if you see some people try to litigate on that front as well. So all that to say that, like I just said, it's not, the Solon won't be a silver bullet. I think it will help in a lot of ways, but it's not going to preclude other things from popping up.
Sam, what do you expect the spring portal to be more of? Guys who are not going to make the 105? I mean, which I know will be a lot, but like, will there be guys of value, or will this be more people who are just kind of random out there?
I think it'll be a mix. It won't be, I don't believe, as splashy or as many headline grabbing names as you get in the winter window naturally, because a lot of these teams are set. A lot of these guys who transfer in the winter already signed contracts, and so they're pretty much locked in for the year. But I think you're going to have a lot of the guys you talked about, the guys who don't make the 105. You can have a lot of those. You're going to have obviously some guys who end up not making the depth chart or what have you, or just feel like, hey, I'm going to make the 105, but I don't like my situation. But you're also going to have what you've seen a few of these guys pop up recently. For instance, I saw North Alabama's had a few guys leave. That is Power 4 programs, or even maybe higher in G5 programs, identifying guys at lower levels saying, hey, we're going through spring practice. We may need a guy at this position, or we really like this guy at this FCS school or this G5 school. And there'll be some poaching. If you're a blue blood and you have a depth question somewhere, you may go find somebody who you think may fit that bill at a smaller school, a MAC school or a Conference USA school or an FCS school. And so I think you'll see some of that as well. There usually is, I know, Jeff Traylor, you guys have had him on multiple times from UTSA. He's talked about having to fight to keep his guys after spring practice. That's absolutely real. So there will be some of that. So some of I don't think it'll be a lot of splashy headline names, but you'll have some guys who are under the radar who maybe we don't know as casual fans that will end up being some impact players down the road, guys that'll make those moves. I think of a lot of different Trey Moore was one of them, I think, last year. I don't remember if he was winter or spring, but Trey was one of those who was not nationally known. Or I think of the guy from James Madison that Texas recruited a few years back, the linebacker Diamante Tucker-Dorsey. That was a guy who was, I think, a spring ad for them. They also went and got some defensive tackles, like Stark went through spring practice and realized, hey, we don't have enough defensive tackles. So they went and got a few in the portal. Those are the kinds of moves that I think you're going to see mostly populating the portal in this spring window.
Sam, I think the announcement about Deion Sanders and his contract extension was the day after we talked to you, I think. So apologies if you already answered this, but your thoughts. I mean, this time last year, people were preparing for the fact that he was getting ready for his last season because his boys were going to graduate and Travis Hunter was going to leave, and then he'd probably go to the NFL or do whatever. But Dion signed a new extension with Colorado, is going to be making great money, and just your thoughts on his impact so far through these first couple years in Boulder. Obviously longer counting Jackson State, but his impact on college football, his impact on Boulder, and what you think the commitment by Colorado means big picture.
Yeah, it's huge. I would have lost a lot of money if you'd asked me to wager when he got the job if he'd be there in 2025, because I would have bet heavily against it, especially after seeing the way the roster was flipped. And it was very clear that they were trying to go all in for that year two after they flipped the roster for a couple of years and try to go win the Big 12 title last year. And once it didn't happen, but they had a really good season, I still thought once his boys move on, once Travis Hunter moves on, he probably moves on as well. It's a big win for Colorado. There's no doubt about it. When you think of where that program was and how bad a shape it was in its Pac-12 existence, and now they are the talk of college football. They may not be the first topic as they were right when Dion got there, but they are a program that people tune in to watch, and that you couldn't say that about Colorado 5 years ago. That's a big win for them. And so to be able to keep him and continue to leverage his name, his brand, the appeal, whether you like him or whether you don't, people pay attention to him. And that's good for recruiting. That's good for the school. That's good for the football program. And honestly, after seeing what he did last year and how they built that team, even though they went so heavy portal, I'm pretty encouraged. I thought they made some good coaching changes. I like some of the things they did on the staff. I like some of the guys they got out of the portal. It seems like they've settled in and they've got a pretty good process. They have a good process for identifying guys and acquiring guys. And they even got another blue chip recruit this time around with Juju Lewis. That's going to make it fascinating. But I really like it. I think I'm happy for them. I think Dion's really good for college football and that he gets people talking. And he's very honest. He's very upfront. He broadcasts everything clearly. And I think it makes people have some conversations about, how we do things and having that different blood, that new blood, throwing out different ideas. Like the idea that he had and him and Fran Brown trying to do the spring practice, joint practices. I love that. I thought that was a great idea. And we need more people thinking outside the box like that to solve problems in college football. And I thought that was a great solution to what, I don't know if you want to call spring practice a problem, but a trend that we're seeing go in a different direction. I thought Dion and Fran Brown, that was a great idea. I think it's unfortunate that the waiver didn't go through, but I do think it starts a conversation. I think we will see some change going on because rather than talking about it, Dion said, hey, let's do something about it. And I think that'll spark some real movement down the road.
You wonder if they would have brought this up 6 weeks ago. The NCAA was able to use one of the cop-outs was, well, some people are already deep into their spring, and so they really can't react to this. If they didn't have that to lean on, then what would have been their reason to say no to it? And by the way, just the fact that it's a fresh idea, new vision, this sport needs that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why we're in the place we're in with college sports and college football is because for so long there was a lack of, like you said, fresh ideas and fresh vision, and we clung to a very static, staid, outdated way of doing things. Once we got past the point of this being a academic thing, because it used to be in the 80s or 70s. It used to be guys would get jobs in the off season. They wouldn't be training year round. And obviously TV wasn't a big factor. Once TV became a big factor, it turned into a business. That's just the reality. And we've seen the revenues match that. But to your point, I think anytime we have guys throwing out ideas that are outside the status quo, it doesn't mean we have to adopt all of them, but it sparks conversation and it gets people talking and it helps us get to a better place.
Sam Kahn, The Athletic, with athletic.com with us on 365 Sports.
Sam, will you be traveling to any spring scrimmages?
No, not this year. Especially, too, part of it is well, for instance, like Texas doesn't even have it. Mm-hmm. A&M is having one, but I know some of the other schools in state are having one. But, no, it's not, that's going to fall on the time for me being on the phone and trying to track every portal move, and trying to contextualize everything that's going on in the portal. So, Sam, yeah, that's going to be a departure for me. Yeah.
That's like an hour a day.
No, for me, no. Are you kidding me?
No,
okay, let me tell you this. I will tell you this. In December, when I did a little bit of a trial run, like before I pitched this job to move into this job, I gave it a try in December, kind of on an interim basis to see, like, okay, could we make this work? And you guys remember what National Signing Day was like back when it was a big deal. And for any of you guys, I don't know if any of you guys have done the newspaper thing, but at a newspaper, it's an insane day because, especially at a place when I worked at Houston Chronicle, you had to try to get thousands of names in the paper because we had so many of the kids signed, and you're trying to get every college recruiting class in the state, and we're trying to get all our high school athletes' names in the paper, and we're trying to track all the news. And, of course, in Houston, we had a lot of big-time recruits. So that day for me, National Signing Day, back in its heyday when I worked at the newspaper, would start when signing day started, like 7 a.m., and I would not be out of the building until like 2 a.m. until we closed the last edition of the paper. And that was just what it was. And it was constant, on the phone or tracking or all that stuff. So the first week of the winter portal window in December, it felt like 5 signing days in a row.
Oh my gosh.
Because that's how much I was on the phone for that entire week of that first week of the winter window. And then once we got to the second week, it tailed off a little bit, but it was still busy. And then once we got to the final 5-7 days of the winter window, it kind of slowed down, especially as we got closer to Christmas. This spring window won't be quite that technical, but it is still a lot of me, on the phone, texting, calling, tracking, the whole nine. writing headlines, or developing stories for whatever the different angles we want to take in it. So it's a different challenge. It's an exciting one. It's one that I pitched, that I brought up, and that they went for, and I'm very fortunate, and I look forward to it. And it's just a different way that this helps keep me connected to every part of the sport, because everybody in the sport is affected by roster management, by the portal, by revenue sharing, by NIL, by the whole nine. And I've just kind of had a natural interest in it the last few years. And once my good friend Max Olson went over back to ESPN, it opened up an opportunity there. And so I was fortunate that they let me do it.
Well, we're happy for you. And I remember when you were at the Chronicle and much more. Sam, did you hear us, or did you hear the comments from Chris Kleiman and Kirby Smart that we played earlier in the show?
I heard Kleiman's comment earlier today. I don't know what Kirby said.
Yeah, well, I mean, his was different. Kleiman was basically, and we had a really good discussion about this, is that those who are the ones who were affected the most by these new rules of the 105 and all of that are the ones that don't even get an opportunity to be in the room when these decisions are being made, even if they're talking to the ADs. The ADs is the president. They got other things in their minds too. But and he did not know, for example, the 105, some players are going to have to leave. There's no room for them. They're going to have to leave. And number two, is there an injured reserve list? Does anyone know that? Is there a practice squad? Does anyone know that? And he's the coach that has to deal with roster management and doesn't know.
Yeah. That illustrates and underlines how disjointed this whole process has been to get here. And when we've talked in the last couple of years, as we went through the craziness of the unveiling of NIL without any real restrictions or real guidelines, and now we've moved toward the House settlement, that's where we are. We are in April. So we're, 5 months, 6 months from the season, and we have coaches asking questions that we don't have answers to. And that's really difficult. It's really difficult to manage your roster. And I hate to keep going back to the NFL, because this is not NFL football, but that's one reason why the NFL works. Everything is on its strict calendar. We know free agency happens here. The draft happens here. Mini camps happen here. Training camp happens here. Coaching changes can happen here. Like it's all very organized, and we are in college football. We are not. And so that is unfortunate. And you're right. The one thing that I found really fascinating in the last 10, 15 years covering this sport is that so many rules are voted on at a presidential level, and athletics is only a small part of what a college president has to deal with. So that is what is interesting to me, because that when we talk about the settlement is something that big, that's something college presidents are involved in, and it to me, I think Kleiman's right. The more you have coaches and athletic directors and people, or even players, people who are in the process every day that have that expertise with their input, the more likely you're able to get to an outcome that is more reasonable. But that said, they had to end up on some roster limit. Why they ended up at 105, I don't know. Most of the schools that I've talked to, even in the power conferences, most of them are going to still stick to 85 scholarships and go 20 walk.
Yeah,
we'll see if there's anybody that goes over that. But most of the sentiment that I've heard is that that's it's going to be, because coaches still like the walk-on culture. They still like having those types of guys in the building. And so I think you're going to see coaches intentionally continue to do it. But yeah, it is unfortunate for the other 15 to 20 guys that would be on your 120 to 125 that you would have. It's really unfortunate, and they're going to have to find an opportunity, and a lot of them won't be able to get one.
Sam, who are you going to win? Who's going to win the championship in basketball on Monday night in San Antonio?
No idea, but I hope it's Houston.
Yeah,
I'm a Houston grad, so
absolutely.
I sure hope so. It's been a lot of fun to watch them. I'm still a little bit floored that this program is at this point, because I covered that program. My very first college beat was covering, when I was at the Houston Chronicle, was covering U of H in 2011, and it was, I believe, James Dickey's first year there as coach, and I covered his first 2 years of the program. And brother, let me tell you, there was nobody in those buildings. The Hawkeyes Pavilion was a ghost. And so to see that program went from that to now a Final Four twice in a 4-year span, and on the cusp of potentially winning a national championship, it's amazing. And it's a testament to what the administration has done. It's certainly a testament to what Kelvin Sampson has done. So I hope they're able to finish the job. I would be really happy to see them if they're able to do it.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. Good luck to your Cougars this weekend. Also, congratulations on the new opportunity with the athletic.com. So a lot of writers were saying that they've re-upped with the company, and good for them. We had Bruce Feldman, of course, on yesterday with 365 Sports.